In 2025, New York still whispers the names of black crime lords. Bumpy Johnson, brokered with the Mafia, Frank Lucas flooded Harlem with heroin, and Nicky Barnes, the untouchable kingpin. Their empires never truly fell. These are the 7 black Mafia families still ruling from the shadows. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. In the pantheon of American organized crime, few figures command the respect and mystique of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, born October 31, 1905 in Charleston, South Carolina. When we speak of Bumpy Johnson, we're not just discussing a criminal, we're examining a man who became a cultural icon, a community protector, and a shrewd businessman who managed to carve out an autonomous kingdom in Harlem while negotiating with some of the most powerful Italian-American crime families in New York. Johnson's journey to becoming the godfather of Harlem began when his family fled South Carolina in 1919, fearing racial violence after his brother was accused of killing a white man. At just 14 years old, young Ellsworth found himself in the bustling, opportunity-rich yet dangerous streets of Harlem. His nickname Bumpy came from a distinctive deformation on the back of his head, but this physical characteristic would pale in comparison to the formidable reputation he would build over the ensuing decades. What separated Johnson from countless other young men trying to make their mark in Harlem's criminal underworld was his intellectual curiosity and strategic thinking. Known as the Professor for his love of reading history, philosophy, and poetry, as well as his mastery of chess, Johnson understood that true power came not from random violence, but from careful planning, strategic alliances, and maintaining the delicate balance between fear and respect. When Jewish mobster Dutch Schultz attempted to muscle in on Harlem's numbers racket, Johnson didn't just resist, he declared war. As St. Clair's enforcer, Johnson led a guerrilla campaign that resulted in the murder and kidnapping of over 40 of Schultz's men. This wasn't random violence, it was a calculated campaign designed to send a clear message: Harlem would not be colonized by outside forces. The war with Schultz ended in 1935 when Schultz was assassinated by the National Crime Syndicate led by Charles "Lucky" Luciano. What happened next would define Johnson's entire career and establish him as one of the most politically astute criminals in American history. Rather than continuing the conflict, Luciano struck a deal with Johnson, allowing Harlem's black bookmakers to retain independence in exchange for paying a percentage to the Mafia's gambling pool. This agreement was revolutionary. In an era when African Americans were systematically excluded from power structures, Johnson had negotiated with the Italian-American Mafia as an equal. He became the main Harlem associate of the Luciano, later Genovese, crime family, managing numbers rackets, drug trafficking, extortion, and prostitution, while maintaining a degree of autonomy. Johnson's network included some of the most prominent figures of his era. He formed alliances with notable figures like Malcolm X, providing protection after Malcolm split with the Nation of Islam, and befriended celebrities such as Billie Holiday, Sugar Ray Robinson, and Lena Horne. These relationships demonstrated his ability to move seamlessly between the worlds of crime, politics, and entertainment. Johnson's criminal activities led to over 40 arrests, including a 1952 conviction for a heroin conspiracy, resulting in a 15-year sentence, most of which he served at Alcatraz. When he was released in 1963, he was reportedly greeted with a parade in Harlem, though some accounts question this detail. Johnson died of a heart attack on July 7, 1968, at Wells Restaurant in Harlem, but his legacy has only grown stronger with time. When Bumpy's heart stopped in 1968, Harlem held its breath, but the game didn't die with him. It just changed hands. Frank Lucas. From street hustler to heroin kingpin, Frank Lucas didn't just inherit Harlem, he rewired the entire drug trade, cutting out the Mafia and cashing in big. If Bumpy Johnson was the diplomatic architect of Harlem's criminal empire, then Frank Lucas, born September 9, 1930 in LaGrange, North Carolina, was the innovative entrepreneur who revolutionized the very nature of drug trafficking in America. Lucas didn't just participate in the existing system, he completely reimagined it, creating distribution networks and supply chains that would influence organized crime for decades to come. Lucas moved to Harlem in 1946 after a violent incident involving his employer in North Carolina. Initially engaging in petty crimes, his life changed dramatically when he came under the mentorship of Bumpy Johnson. When Johnson died in 1968, Lucas capitalized on the power vacuum to build what would become one of the most sophisticated heroin empires in American history. Working with Leslie "Ike" Atkinson, a North Carolina native, and his cousin's husband, Lucas facilitated heroin smuggling from Thailand. While Lucas claimed to have smuggled drugs in false-bottomed coffins of deceased U.S. servicemen, Atkinson later denied this, stating drugs were hidden in furniture instead. Regardless of the exact method, the innovation was clear. Lucas had created an international supply chain that operated independently of existing criminal hierarchies. The product that emerged from this supply chain was revolutionary in its own right. Lucas's heroin, branded Blue Magic, was 10 to 12% pure, significantly stronger than the typical 5 to 6% street heroin. This wasn't just about drug purity, it was about brand management, quality control, and customer loyalty. Lucas reportedly earned up to $1 million per day at his peak, demonstrating the economic power of vertical integration and quality control. The organizational structure Lucas created was equally innovative. He employed family members from North Carolina, known as the Country Boys, to manage distribution, ensuring loyalty through familial bonds. This wasn't just about nepotism, it was a sophisticated approach to personnel management that recognized the importance of trust and loyalty in illegal enterprises. Lucas's success enabled him to live a lifestyle that challenged conventional notions of who could achieve wealth and status in America. His wealth allowed him to mingle with celebrities like Muhammad Ali and Diana Ross. His famous $125,000 chinchilla coat and matching hat, worn to the 1971 Ali Frazier fight, drew significant law enforcement attention, a perfect example of how success can become its own liability. The end of Lucas's empire came in 1975 when he was arrested after a raid on his Teaneck, New Jersey home, where authorities seized $584,683 in cash, though Lucas claimed the DEA stole much more. He was convicted of drug trafficking and initially sentenced to 70 years in prison. What happened next demonstrated Lucas's pragmatic approach to survival. After becoming an informant, he provided evidence leading to over 100 convictions, including corrupt NYPD officers and Mafia associates, which reduced his sentence to 5 years. This cooperation was controversial within criminal circles, but reflected Lucas's fundamental philosophy: adapt to survive and thrive within whatever system exists. Frank's fall was as legendary as his rise, but by then the streets were already hooked on Blue Magic and on the new world he'd built. Just as one empire peaked, another was already rising, built on loyalty, image, and a code that promised power no courtroom could touch. Leroy Nicky Barnes. In the pantheon of 1970s New York organized crime, few figures embodied the intersection of business acumen, street credibility, and media savvy quite like Leroy Nicholas Nicky Barnes. Born October 15, 1933 in Harlem, where Lucas dealt in product, Nicky Barnes dealt in power. With suits sharper than his tongue and an ego branded untouchable, he turned crime into a corporate structure. Barnes wasn't just another drug dealer, he was a visionary who attempted to create the African-American equivalent of the Italian-American Mafia's commission, complete with formal structure, dispute resolution mechanisms, and territorial agreements. Barnes grew up in a challenging environment, leaving home to escape an abusive father and eventually becoming addicted to heroin. His early criminal career began with arrests starting at age 10 for burglary, but his transformation from street-level criminal to criminal mastermind occurred during his incarceration. While serving time at Greenhaven Correctional Facility in 1965, Barnes met Italian Mafia figures like Crazy Joe Gallo of the Colombo family and Matthew Madonna of the Lucchese family. These prison relationships were transformative for Barnes. Rather than simply learning criminal techniques, he absorbed organizational principles, management strategies, and the importance of formal structure in criminal enterprises. When he was released in 1971, Barnes applied Mafia-style structures to his drug trafficking operations, creating something unprecedented in African-American organized crime. In 1972, Barnes formed The Council, a 7-man African-American syndicate that controlled much of Harlem's heroin trade. The council included key figures like Joseph Jazz Hayden, Wallace Rice, Thomas Gapps Foreman, Ishmael Muhammad, Frank James, and Guy Fisher. This wasn't just a gang, it was a formal organization with a motto: treat my brother as I treat myself. The sophistication of Barnes's operation was remarkable. By 1976, his network employed 7 lieutenants, each overseeing a dozen mid-level distributors, who supplied up to 40 street-level dealers. The operation extended beyond New York to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Arizona, and Canada, generating an estimated $70 million annually. Barnes partnered with the Italian-American Mafia, particularly the Lucchese family, which supplied raw heroin that the council diluted and distributed. This relationship demonstrated his ability to maintain independence while recognizing the value of strategic partnerships with established power structures. Barnes's lifestyle reflected his success and his understanding of the importance of image and reputation. His flashy lifestyle, luxury cars, 60 pairs of custom shoes, 27 leather coats, and 200 suits earned him the nickname Mr. Untouchable. This wasn't mere ostentation, it was strategic image management designed to build respect and intimidate rivals. The pinnacle and beginning of the end of Barnes's career came with his 1977 New York Times Magazine cover story titled Mr. Untouchable. The article, featuring him in a denim suit and red, white, and blue tie, portrayed him as Harlem's biggest drug dealer, infuriating President Jimmy Carter, who ordered Attorney General Griffin Bell to prosecute him aggressively. Barnes was arrested in 1977 on narcotics conspiracy charges and sentenced to life without parole in 1978, but perhaps the most controversial chapter of his story was yet to come. In 1982, angered by the council's failure to support him and a personal betrayal involving a colleague sleeping with his girlfriend, Barnes became a federal informant. Barnes's testimony led to the indictment of 44 associates, the conviction of 16, and the dissolution of the council in 1983. For his cooperation, U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani reduced Barnes's sentence to 35 years. Released in 1998, Barnes entered the Federal Witness Protection Program, living under a new identity until his death from cancer in 2012. His death was not publicized until 2019, reflecting his protected status. While Barnes tried to run Harlem like a corporation, the streets were shifting, growing colder, bloodier, and when strategy gave way to savagery, Harlem met a new breed of terror, less about structure, more about domination through fear. Clarence "Preacher" Heatley. If Harlem had ghosts, Preacher was the one they feared most. Ruthless, calculating, and cold-blooded, he turned crime into psychological warfare. In the violent and competitive world of 1980s and 1990s, New York organized crime, Clarence "Preacher" Heatley emerged as one of the most feared and ruthless criminal leaders in the city's history. Operating primarily in Harlem and the Bronx from the 1970s to the mid-1990s, Heatley didn't just run a criminal organization, he created a reign of terror that would fundamentally change how organized crime operated in African-American communities. Born around 1953, Heatley earned his nickname Preacher for his persuasive oratory and charismatic personality. But beneath this surface charm lay a calculating and merciless criminal mind. His organization, known as the Family or the Black Hand of Death, represented a new evolution in organized crime, one that combined traditional racketeering with unprecedented levels of violence and intimidation. What distinguished Heatley's operation from other criminal enterprises was its systematic approach to violence and terror. The Preacher crew was notorious for its practice of extorting drug dealers, demanding payments ranging from $20,000 to $30,000 to avoid violence. This wasn't random street crime. It was a sophisticated protection racket that targeted the most profitable elements of the drug trade. The crew's activities extended far beyond simple extortion. They were involved in kidnapping, with some of the most high-profile cases in New York criminal history. One of the most notorious alleged incidents involved singer Bobby Brown, whom they reportedly held for ransom over a drug debt, with Whitney Houston allegedly paying to secure his release. Whether this specific incident occurred as reported, it demonstrates the kind of high-profile, audacious crimes that defined the Preacher crew's operations. Perhaps the most shocking case associated with the Preacher crew was the kidnapping and murder of 11-year-old Donald Porter, the brother of Harlem drug lord Rich Porter, orchestrated with involvement from Porter's uncle, a crew affiliate. This case demonstrated the crew's willingness to target family members and use extreme violence to send messages to rivals and victims. The organizational structure of the Preacher crew reflected Heatley's background and personality, sometimes referred to as the Family due to the involvement of his son, daughter, and girlfriend. The organization blended personal relationships with criminal enterprise. Heatley's top lieutenant, John Cuff, a former New York City housing police officer known as Captain Jack Frost, or Big Cuz, served as his enforcer and was implicated in 8 murders. What made Cuff particularly dangerous was his law enforcement background. As a former housing police officer, he understood police procedures, investigation techniques, and the legal system in ways that typical criminals did not. This knowledge made him an exceptionally effective criminal and enforcer, and he was rumored to be the only person Heatley feared. The Preacher crew's approach to violence was systematic and terrifying. They employed janitors to clean up murder scenes, using acid to dissolve tattoos and dismembering bodies to prevent identification. Victims were often tortured before being killed, with methods including strangulation and dismemberment with tools like circular saws. This wasn't just murder, it was psychological warfare designed to terrorize entire communities. By the early 1990s, the Preacher crew's violent activities drew significant attention from law enforcement. The New York Police Department and FBI formed a task force, including the FBI's C-11 squad, to dismantle the organization. Estimates linked them to nearly 45 homicides by the early 1990s, making them one of the most prolific murder organizations in New York's criminal history. In 1996, a 47-count federal indictment charged 18 crew members with racketeering, 11 murders, 11 conspiracies to commit murder, and narcotics trafficking. Heatley and Cuff, arrested in 1994 to 1995, accepted plea deals to avoid the death penalty, with Heatley's cooperation leading to the conviction of other members. Heatley is currently incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution in Talladega, Alabama, while Cuff was sentenced to life plus 145 years after Heatley's testimony. The dismantling of the Preacher crew marked the end of one of the most violent criminal organizations in New York's history. Yet New York wasn't the only city where black crime families built empires. In another stronghold, discipline and silence became deadly tools of control: Philadelphia Black Mafia. While New York's criminal organizations dominated dominated headlines and popular culture, the Philadelphia Black Mafia, PBM, also known as the Black Muslim Mafia or Muslim Mob, represented perhaps the most disciplined and organizationally sophisticated African-American crime syndicate in American history. Formed in the late 1960s and officially affirmed on December 23, 1968, the PBM didn't just engage in criminal activities. They created a formal organizational structure that rivaled the Italian-American Mafia in its complexity and effectiveness. The PBM began as a small criminal collective in South Philadelphia, initially engaging in low-level activities such as holding up neighborhood crap games and dealing in illegal drugs. The group was founded by individuals with extensive criminal records, including Samuel Bea Christian, a former Black Panther, alongside others like Ronald Harvey, Henry Dabney, Richard Porkchops James, and Robert Nudie Mims. What made the PBM unique was its relationship with the Nation of Islam. Many members were associated with the Nation of Islam, NOI, or converted to Islam, which led to the nickname Black Muslim Mafia or Muslim Mob. This religious affiliation was often used as a front to mask their criminal enterprises, but it also provided a philosophical framework and organizational structure that influenced how the group operated. At its peak from the early 1970s to the early 1980s, the PBM controlled a significant portion of criminal activity in African-American neighborhoods across Philadelphia and the Delaware Valley, including South Jersey, Atlantic City and Camden, Chester, and Wilmington. This wasn't just local influence, it was regional dominance that crossed state lines and affected multiple metropolitan areas. The PBM's organizational structure was remarkably sophisticated. They operated with a disciplined, hierarchical structure, borrowing elements from both the Nation of Islam and Italian-American Mafia. Members swore an oath to maintain secrecy and report violations, with threats to family members ensuring compliance. Meetings required members to be searched, and only the presiding member could designate who carried weapons. The scope of PBM's criminal activities was comprehensive and sophisticated. They were heavily involved in drug trafficking, particularly heroin and cocaine distribution, often sourcing drugs from New York-based suppliers like Frank Matthews after initially working with the Gambino crime family. They engaged in extortion and racketeering, targeting bookmakers, brothel owners, and other illegal operators, as well as legitimate businesses using violence and intimidation. The PBM was responsible for over 40 murders, including high-profile cases like the 1971 Dubrow furniture store robbery and the 1973 massacre of 2 adults and 5 children in Washington, D.C., in a feud with a rival Muslim faction. They also secured fraudulent community development grants, leveraging ties with local politicians and civil rights leaders. What distinguished the PBM from other criminal organizations was their systematic approach to territorial control and business management. They engaged in prostitution, loan sharking, number running, and illegal gambling, creating a diversified criminal portfolio that provided multiple revenue streams and reduced dependence on any single illegal activity. The PBM's operations were marked by ruthless violence and a stop-snitching culture, which silenced communities and made prosecutions difficult. Wiretapping became a key tool for law enforcement due to widespread fear of retaliation. A notable unsolved case linked to the PBM is the 1976 murder of Maya Taz Lang, manager and girlfriend of singer Teddy Pendergrass, allegedly due to their resentment of her control over his career. The PBM's relationship with other criminal organizations was complex and strategic. Initially, the PBM competed with the Philadelphia crime family, Bruno Scarfo family, for control of African-American neighborhoods. They extorted Italian operatives, leading to tensions that nearly sparked a war. An agreement was reached where the PBM paid a street tax to the Bruno family for gambling rackets. The PBM's reign began to wane in the mid-1970s due to several factors. Wiretapping and informant testimonies led to convictions for crimes like heroin and cocaine distribution, rape, and murder. A 21-day wiretapping operation provided critical evidence. Internal conflicts, including the 1969 murder of founding member Nathaniel Rock'n'Roll Williams by the group, signaled early internal strife. Additional killings and factionalism weakened the organization. Key members, including Samuel Christian and Robert Mims, were imprisoned, disrupting leadership. By the early 1980s, New York-based Jamaican posses began taking over drug distribution in Philadelphia's black neighborhoods, challenging PBM's control. The PBM effectively ceased operations by 1984, with its remnants splintering into factions. However, their influence continued through the Junior Black Mafia, JBM, which was organized in 1985 by former PBM members, including Robert Mims from Graterford Prison, to counter Jamaican posses. But even the most disciplined syndicates couldn't prepare for what came next. A criminal dynasty so flashy, so massive, it blurred the line between gangster and celebrity. Black Mafia family. In the landscape of American organized crime, few groups have achieved the combination of criminal success and cultural influence that characterized the Black Mafia Mafia family, BMF, founded in 1985 by brothers Demetrius Big Meech Flannery and Terry Southwest T. Flannery in southwest Detroit. While BMF's criminal activities were centered primarily in Detroit and Atlanta rather than New York, their influence on hip-hop culture and their sophisticated approach to drug trafficking and money laundering made them one of the most significant African-American organized crime groups in American history. They weren't just traffickers, they were icons. Big Meech and Southwest T built BMF like a cartel with a record deal, pushing weight while throwing parties that shook cities. BMF emerged in the late 1980s from Detroit's economically challenged neighborhoods, where the Flannery brothers began selling cocaine during their high school years. Initially known as the 50 Boys, they expanded their operations by establishing a sophisticated drug trafficking network. What distinguished BMF from other drug trafficking organizations was their understanding that successful criminal enterprises needed to be more than just crime syndicates. They needed to be cultural movements. By 2000, BMF had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, distributing cocaine across multiple states, with hubs in Atlanta, led by Demetrius, and Los Angeles, led by Terry. The organization leveraged direct connections to Mexican drug cartels, enabling them to move hundreds of kilograms of cocaine monthly, generating an estimated $270 million in revenue between 1989 and 2005. BMF's structure was hierarchical, with the Flannery brothers as leaders, supported by lieutenants, distributors, and couriers like Jabari Hayes. At its peak, BMF had over 500 members operating in states including Georgia, California, Florida, and Michigan. The organization used vehicles with secret compartments to transport drugs and cash.
Largest drug operations during the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. The pair had hundreds of employees, generated hundreds of millions of dollars, and even had a successful record label and magazine.
What truly set BMF apart was their creation of BMF Entertainment. The organization established BMF Entertainment, a hip-hop promotion agency, as a front for money laundering and to gain legitimacy. This wasn't just a money laundering operation. It was a genuine attempt to build a legitimate entertainment empire that could provide long-term success beyond drug trafficking. Demetrius Flannery, known for his charismatic persona, cultivated relationships with high-profile artists like Sean Diddy Combs, Jay-Z, Young Jeezy, and Fabulous. BMF Entertainment promoted artists such as Blue Da Vinci, whose 2005 album World is BMF's was nominated for a Source Award. The organization's lavish lifestyle, marked by extravagant parties, luxury cars, and jewelry, became legendary, with billboards in Atlanta proclaiming, "The world is BMF's." BMF's visibility in hip-hop was amplified through music and media. Rick Ross's 2010 song BMF, Blowin' Money Fast, referenced Big Meech, while appearances in underground DVD magazines like Smack and The Raw Report showcased their influence. BMF's high-profile activities drew intense scrutiny from law enforcement. The Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, launched Operation Motor City Mafia in 2003, using wiretaps, surveillance, and informant testimonies to target the organization. In October 2005, a major raid led to the arrest of 30 BMF members, with seizures of $2 million in cash, 2.5 kilograms of cocaine, and assets worth $21 million, including homes and vehicles. By 2009, 150 individuals linked to BMF faced charges. In November 2007, the Flannery brothers pleaded guilty to running a continuing criminal enterprise involving large-scale cocaine distribution from 1990 to 2005. Both were sentenced to 30 years in prison in 2008. The operation's dismantling was a significant blow, with the FBI effectively eradicating BMF's network, including prosecuting associates like jeweler Jacob Arabov for money laundering. As of June 20, 2025, BMF as an organized criminal entity is largely defunct, though its legacy persists in pop culture and limited criminal activities by alleged associates. Demetrius Big Meech Flannery, originally set to be released in 2031, had his sentence reduced due to rehabilitation efforts, including earning a GED and mentoring inmates. In October 2024, he was transferred to a residential re-entry program in Miami to serve the remainder of his sentence, with a release date of January 27, 2026. But not all empires ruled the streets. Some grew behind prison walls, mixing revolution with organized crime. The most feared among them, the Black Guerrilla family. Born in a prison cell armed with ideology and violence, the Black Guerrilla family didn't just want money, they wanted revolution. While most criminal organizations focus primarily on profit and territorial control, the Black Guerrilla family, BGF, represents a unique hybrid of revolutionary political organization and traditional prison gang, established in 1966 at San Quentin State Prison in California by George Jackson, a Black Panther Party member, along with George Big Jake Lewis and W.L. Nolan. The BGF didn't just engage in criminal activities, they created an ideological framework that combined Marxist Marxist-Leninist philosophy with practical criminal enterprise. The BGF began as a revolutionary organization inspired by Marcus Garvey, aiming to promote black power, maintain dignity in prison, and resist systemic racism with an ideological Marxist-Leninist framework. Initially a prison-based movement, the BGF evolved into a prison and street gang with criminal activities, including drug trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes. Its dual nature included a revolutionary militant faction and a criminal faction focused on monetary gain. What distinguishes the BGF from other criminal organizations is their sophisticated organizational structure and political consciousness. The BGF operates with a hierarchical structure, organizing members into regimes or bubbles corresponding to specific regions or neighborhoods, led by bush members who oversee larger territories. This structure allows for both centralized leadership and decentralized operations, making the organization resilient to law enforcement pressure. In Maryland, the BGF has been notably active. A 2019 federal case highlighted its control over drug trafficking in Baltimore, with leader Sean Thomas sentenced to 35 years for racketeering conspiracy. Thomas managed a regime in North Baltimore, distributing narcotics and collecting gang dues. This case demonstrates the BGF's ability to operate sophisticated criminal enterprises while maintaining their ideological framework. A 2013 scandal at the Baltimore City Detention Center revealed BGF member Tevon White's influence as he allegedly controlled the facility with the help of 4 female guards, whom he impregnated, to smuggle contraband. This incident underscored the gang's ability to corrupt institutional systems, demonstrating how revolutionary ideology could be combined with traditional criminal corruption. The BGF has complex relationships with other groups. It has historical rivalries with the Aryan Brotherhood and Mexican Mafia, but has occasionally collaborated with them, such as during the 2011 California hunger strike to end racial hostilities. It also maintains alliances with groups like the Bloods, Crips, and Nuestra Familia in certain contexts. Recent convictions, such as the 2019 sentencing of Sean Thomas, indicate that the BGF remains active in organized crime, particularly in Maryland. The BGF's role in Baltimore's 2015 unrest was initially overstated by police, who claimed it was targeting officers alongside the Bloods and Crips. Leaders of these gangs denied the allegations and worked to maintain peace, suggesting the BGF's street influence may be more nuanced than reported. Today, BGF still operates in the shadows where politics meets power and gang codes blur into something far more dangerous. The streets still have stories to tell. Hit the cards showing on your screen now to discover more untold stories from the world's darkest corners.